Welcome back for another lesson from the Tactical Sword Academy. I've already discussed footwork, angles of attack, and stance. Now we're moving on to the first, and yet probably the most useful cutting attack that you can learn, the chop. In the previous video I discussed a little bit about the difference between primarily percussive cutting attacks and draw-based attacks. The chop is a percussive attack. Chop is basically just what it sounds like. It's a very powerful percussive attack that's intended to cleave right through the target. And the chop is what you naturally do when you pick up a sword and strike with it. The idea is that you are loading the weapon and then delivering a straight, snapping motion intended to cleave through the target. From the ready stance, prepare yourself for the chop attack by loading your blade. What I mean by load the blade is to bring the tip back behind you, cocking the weapon and readying it for a very powerful strike. This is an extended guard. It threatens with the point. This is a loaded guard. It threatens with the chop. You can either bring the tip of the blade around in a moulinet, or you can draw it straight back. Now, from the loaded guard to chop, simply uncoil your arm and snap it straight down. When I am chopping from above, either on angle 1 or angle 2, the terminal point of my chopping attack is down at the ground. I am carrying the blade all the way through the target. Hopefully I've severed something on the target. And to prepare myself for my next attack, I'm going to have to bring my blade back up around. Let's see that again, shall we? From the ready position, I load my blade, and along angle 1, I uncoil my arm and chop straight through the target. There is no slicing motion in this attack. You do not draw the length of the blade along the target. Yes, in other cutting motions, you will be using a draw, but in the chop, you will not. This is just a straight power stroke. A drawing motion with a sword slices through flesh and cloth. But a chop, heavy, sheer percussive power, like you're driving a nail with a hammer, that severs bone. That breaks your opponent. There is massive percussive power in a chopping attack, and that is the goal. You must understand that there is very little that is subtle about a chopping attack. While it can be quick, it can come out of nowhere, it can be deceptive, it can be coupled with feints. It is not a slight motion. Chop can be executed from any of the 8 angles. However, it is the most effective from angles 1 and 2. It can be done horizontally. As you can see, my terminal point is just past the target here. I'm taking a very wide arc, snapping my arm, and after I've made it through the target, I reverse course. To chop from an upwards angle, angles 3 or 4, you're going to have to put your blade in a loaded guard down low, as you see here, and then simply snap your arm up, with this hanging guard being your terminal point. After this, you are recovering from the strike. You're no longer striking. Anything in this path is being struck. Up here, you reverse course, or bring the blade around to strike from below again. The interesting thing about the chop, as opposed to a straight slashing motion that pulls the edge fully across the target, is that that energy loaded into your strike has to go somewhere. If your course is interrupted by the opponent's weapon, he successfully blocks or parries your attack, or by his body, all of that energy is going to be dissipated. It's going to shock both of you. It's going to go back up into your arm. It could jar you, especially if the handle of your weapon is not good for controlling shock distribution to your arm. And it's also going to go into him. You could potentially cause concussive trauma beneath armor with a chopping blow. That's not going to happen if you're just pulling your edge across the target, obviously. So that could be a pro. The con of that situation is that it's going to be harder to retain your weapon. It's more likely to damage your weapon, potentially break your blade if it's got a brittle temper. if you ever had to pick up a sword and use it in your own defense, you'd probably end up using a chopping attack. It's a good way to ensure maximum damage on the target. Everything we do in swordplay is a question of trade-off and compromise. The chopping attack is the most powerful. That's how you sever somebody's arm or head. The very nature of the loading motion, preparing yourself for the strike by bringing the blade back or around, alerts your opponent that you're about to strike at them from this angle. The chop has more power, but it also kind of gives away what you're about to do. That might not always matter. It's something to take into consideration. If I've got somebody charging at me with an axe in their hands, I'm not about to sit here and try to duel with them. I'm not going to be using little swipe cuts or snaps. I need to stop them. I need to get out of the way and cut his arm off. That's what the chop is for. Powerful attacks for powerful moments. Chop requires a load up, and it requires a wide arc of motion. But you can transition quickly from one chop to the next. A word of caution. When you're practicing the chopping attack, you don't want to hurt your joints. Yes, I am snapping my arm all the way up until my elbow is virtually straight in this attack. However, be careful about this. Don't put too much force on your joints. If you go full force and suddenly snap your arm and let your elbow hyperextend, you're going to be hurting pretty soon. It's important to take the motions slow and to stop yourself before you hyperextend your elbow. Don't damage your joints. Don't go overboard with this, especially with heavier weapons. They're going to have a lot more impact on you. It's important that if you're using a pel to practice, you don't just dump all of your energy into a chopping attack on that pel with your training sword. That's how you hurt yourself. Pull your blows if you have to. You can still practice good cutting mechanics, good speed, good follow-through, everything you need to with a pel or a hanging tire or cutting a target. You don't need to damage your joints. Sometimes, yeah, you gotta go full force. Find a malleable target, a malleable training sword, something that doesn't transmit a lot of shock to your hands, and go at it for a while. It's a lot like punching a heavy bag. If you've ever tried to punch a heavy bag, missed, and overextended your arm with a full force blow, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's no bueno. So, to recap, the chop is an incredibly powerful attack. It requires you to load your blade before the strike. You want to basically strike with a snapping, uncoiling motion using your entire arm and your shoulder. A little bit like a whip, a little bit like a hammer. Just hit. Just try to put power into it. Keep good edge alignment. Stop down low with your point facing out, and then come around again for the next movement. All right, my friends, keep your blades sharp until next time, and stay tuned, because one of these days, I'm going to have to teach you how to use both a sword and a pistol at the same time.